going to go ahead and record onto this computer just so I have it local, set up to the cloud. Oh, there's 40 people in the waiting room. Oh, Alexia, what the heck? You bringing your fan club tonight?
I guess.
There was 47 people said that they're going.
And you need, hey, you need to give me and Corey like co-host ability.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry.
You're not going to be there to let people in. I don't know how that's going to work if you're the host and you can't let people. Who's going to let people in?
Let's see. It's shifting around.
Because I can't see that there's any participants anymore. I just see us 5. I don't see the waiting room.
Okay, so I just made Corey the host, I think.
All right.
So you can still record while he's the host. Okay.
Do we allow these guys in? I don't know how to do co-host. So I'll probably be popping in and popping out just because of kids, but so I apologize for that. This is a completely abnormal night, but
You're all right.
Yes. All right, we're gonna let everyone in here, and
Well, I guess I don't have the option to, so maybe.
I think Corey's got to do it now. He's the host.
All right. So it says participants.
You click on the participants, it'll pop up a thing and it'll show you everybody. There should be like an admit all.
Admit all.
Yep. Admit all. There we go. They're all joining.
There you go.
They're all going nuts.
We might want to give it just a minute to kind of make sure we got everybody's video off and people don't kind of try and turn.
All right, I just muted you, Everett. Sorry, I muted everybody.
Everybody. You need to unmute Alexia so she can talk.
We're gonna ask everybody in the audience, please turn your camera off.
It's supposed to be set up so that this wasn't an option.
Yeah, I think some people just kind of turn it on. Just
Yeah, I think it's just one of those buttons that you push when you're first entering in. So
we also asked that you would mute. Looks like there's a few. Is there a way to make me co-host, Corey?
Let's see.
There should be. Make me co-host too. When you figure it out.
I just have make host.
Let's see.
I have make host, and then under Celeste, I have make host.
Huh.
I don't know if there's a co-host, unless you can send me.
Okay.
All right. And then everybody out there that just joined in, if you look at the chat, you may have missed it. I'll post it again just in case you missed it. But there's a shortcut for Mac users and Windows users, so you can raise your hand. It'll make it easier so we can see who has questions when we ask who has questions, and then you guys can raise your hands.
That section, absolutely. That's awesome.
And for those not watching the Super Bowl.
Oh, I'm watching it. It's right here next to my screen. So you watch my eyeballs roll over.
Oh, now we know. Lexie is like, hey,
No,
Just kidding.
Corey.
The game's over. The game's over.
Yeah, the game has been over for a while.
Yeah, it's been over since the third quarter, or maybe even the half.
Right, right.
All right. So
Okay.
did you figure out co-host, Corey, or no?
I can't co-host you. I can't add a co-host, but I can just be the host.
It says under the participants window, click on manage participants in the meeting controls at the bottom. And then hover over the name of the participant is going to be co-host and choose more. Click make co-host. I don't know why.
All right, so let's see more. And yeah, it says make host still. Allowed to record local files. Let's see. Yeah, it's not allowing me to do it. Weird. Let me try again. Yeah, no.
If not, I guess you just get full control. So that means you'll have to be in charge of if people unmute or if people turn on their.
There's a co-host option in the meeting tab. Verify
In the meeting tab.
Yeah.
Up on top.
Yeah, it says sign into the Zoom web portal as an administrator with the privilege to edit account settings and click account settings.
I'm on the app, so I'm not on the web.
Yeah,
I'm on the
I
app.
think I do it on the web. Let me see. Let me try just log.
We're trying to iron out a few kinks right now, so hang on.
We switched over from Nick's account to my account, so we're kind of getting a few things rolling here. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll try and get this going while we're doing it, and then we can switch it. So, all right.
All righty. So, since you're here, are you going to be starting it off there?
Yeah, I'll get us rolling for a little bit. Again, I'll probably be popping in and popping out just because I happen to have my kids late, and I do have to drop them off in a little bit, but I will be back because this is one that I hear is going to be pretty amazing and pretty fantastic. So, Alexia, welcome to the hot seat. You're really nervous and embarrassed because we're definitely going to, make it a fun time.
Bring it.
All right, great, fantastic. That's what we like. So, would like to just welcome everybody to the show. Apparently, I've cloned myself. Celeste is also named Everett as well.
Nice. Okay, I'll rename myself.
Yeah, tonight we've got Alexia, and for those of us who are just joining us for the first time, the whole purpose of this podcast is really just to get a chance to know Alexia, but also to discuss some common issues and some things that are important that are happening in the LDS crazy dating world that we live in. And for those of you who are here at this point in time and have been in the LDS dating world for any length of time, you probably have run across several of these issues many, many times. So what we like to do, Alexia, obviously you're an admin of one of these bigger groups, so you probably have a fairly decent exposure to some of that. So we're going to spend the first amount of time getting to know you, and then we're going to discuss some of these issues. And then we'll open it up to the audience. We ask that everybody please keep their microphones muted and their cameras off during the length of the show. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask it in the chat. We'll get to it as we're kind of going through and able to answer some of those. We may have a point in time where we can kind of open it up to some guest questions and have you come on one at a time and ask Alexia personally. So having said that, one last little bit of business. Please like us on Facebook, share with your friends. We'd love to grow the podcast more. Like us on YouTube as well. We are going to be posting some more of those videos, and we will be growing the show as much as we can. So, Alexia, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I have kind of a distinct advantage or disadvantage, I should say, of I don't really know you. So this is going to be a completely all natural chance to get to hear from you and get to talk with you and find out a little bit more about you. So tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been single? You don't have to tell us details of, how that happened or anything any more than you want to, but tell us a little bit about you. Where do you live? What are you all about?
Okay. I live in just outside Boise, Idaho. I'm in Nampa. I grew up here.
Uh-oh. Somehow you got muted there. I think everybody got muted.
No, I think we're still here.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry,
Back.
Alexia, something happened.
She is back.
That's all.
Yeah.
Where did I lose
Good.
you?
You were in Nampa. That's what we heard.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
You're fine. I live in Nampa, Idaho, and I grew up here. Lived here till I was about junior in high school. Moved to California. Served a mission. Moved back to California. Moved back to Idaho 7 years ago. That's the really condensed history of my moving. I have been single for 2 years, separated 2.5. So not a lot. I think I was on one of these podcasts when you guys were like, man, everybody is really short on the time frame. But I'm divorced. I have 4 kids. I don't know. You got to ask me questions. Ask me questions and I'll answer. I'm really bad at just spewing information.
So Alexia, what do you do for a living?
Okay, so I am both a photographer and a teacher. I was trying to be hired on as a seminary teacher. Love teaching the gospel, love teaching seminary. It did not work out, which is a bummer, but it was such an amazing experience. And now I'm working towards getting my certification to teach either middle school or high school. I haven't decided which. But my other passion and full-time job is photography. I've been doing that for about, see, my son is 14, so about 14 years. No.
Wow, nice. So what kind of
Yeah.
photography do you do? Are you like a
Oh.
wildlife photographer? Are you like, is it like Playboy magazine?
No,
Yeah.
no, I do a little bit of everything, but I mostly specialize in women's portraiture, and that ranges, and then high school senior portraiture. I dabble in weddings sometimes, but I'll be honest, I really hate photographing weddings. Well, I hate editing weddings. The weddings itself are fine, but editing weddings is a tedious, boring process. So, but I love working with women and high school seniors. That's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
I also like doing, I've been working on some projects. I love creative photography, anything that's just a creative outlet. And I've been working on some women in the scripture portraitures. That's been an ongoing project for a couple of years. I'm working on a book with a friend of mine and producing some work for her stuff. So yeah.
That sounds like fun.
It is. It gives me an outlet.
So what's your
So.
favorite editing tool?
Photoshop. I use Photoshop.
Do you?
Yeah. I do some composite work, and I try to do as much as I can in camera. Cause like I said, I hate the tedious stuff editing. I used to love it. And when you're compositing, that can be a lot of fun. But like with portraiture, it's just doing the same thing over and over. It's not my thing. But so I try to do as much as I can in camera. But yeah, I use a lot of Photoshop.
And what is your favorite camera? Like, what do you use? Canon? Are you a
Like,
Nikon girl?
Or you Canon.
I am a Canon girl.
Oh,
I
good job.
thought
Oh, I'm a Nikon guy. Sorry.
Are you?
All the way.
That's okay. I thought I wanted to do Nikon when I first was getting into photography. I really had researched my cameras, and I was all in for Nikon. And then somebody gave me a Canon to start out with, and you start with one, and it's hard to switch. So
Yeah.
that's what. Yeah, and I love Canon. I like the Sigma lenses more than Canon lenses, but I do love Canon.
That's nice. Yeah. Well, we have some people have already praised you, said you're an amazing, talented portrait photographer. Veronica.
That's very kind of them. Very kind.
So that you must have some fans on here that are joining in. So.
Yeah, it looks like she's brought her whole little crew with her here. Little fan.
I am blessed in the friends department, you guys. Oh, that's right. I did do Shasta's sister's wedding. I have friends. They're very kind. They're very sweet. So
That is awesome. So you mentioned that you went on a mission. So why don't you tell us about that?
I went to the Montana Billings mission, which was perfect for me. So when I wasn't even sure I wanted to go on a mission. When I was in college, I was engaged to someone, and I'm like, let's see, I had to have been 20 because this was back in the days when the age was 21 for women. And I remember turning 20 and kneeling down and being like, okay, Heavenly Father, I will serve a mission in a year if you want me to. But wouldn't I make an amazing wife and mother? And so I'm kind of negotiating with him. And then that fell through. I ended up breaking off the engagement there. And so when I turned 21, I was going through the CES program, working to become a seminary teacher back then. And when I turned 21 again, I'm like, all right, Heavenly Father, I will serve a mission if you want me to, but wouldn't I be an amazing seminary teacher? And so, but through that process, I actually had a roommate who was prepping to go on a mission. And I remember I started thinking, well, maybe I need to just look at it. And I started doing research and reading up on conference talks and trying to decide if this was for me. And I remember it was the most frustrating process because I would pray, and the answer I would get was, your decision, I will be pleased. And then I'd get a blessing, and I'd receive the same inspiration whatever or answer, whatever you decide, I will be pleased. And then when I went to go see my bishop, he's like, normally I feel really inspired one way or the other to direct you or direct the sisters. But for you, I feel impressed to tell you that, whatever decision you make, the Lord will be pleased. And I was like, so basically the Lord doesn't care what I do.
He's like,
And,
like whichever path
right.
you can take, right? That's awesome.
Right. But I received an incredible experience when I finally made it out to Montana. And I remember, so I got sent, I don't know if anybody here is from Montana. I got sent to northern Montana, and sisters aren't normally allowed to serve on reservations. There's several reservations in Montana.
Yeah.
And when I was preparing, I remember reading through the Book of Mormon, and I thought, gosh, this would be really cool if I got sent somewhere where I could teach the Lamanites. But I knew I didn't want to go foreign. Like, I had taken French for 4 years, and you guys, I can't speak it at all. So yeah, so I was like, I don't think foreign's really my gig. And so, but I really thought it'd be cool to teach the Lamanites. And so when I got called to Montana, they sent me to northern Montana to a place called Polson. And Polson, part of the area involves the Salish Kootenai Reservation. The transfer before I got there, they had just whitewashed the area from elders, and they had put sisters in. And so we served there I was there for 3 months. And my transfer, after I was transferred out, they closed it back to sisters and put elders back in. So for the 3 months, I got to serve on the Salish Kootenai Reservation, which was awesome. And while I was there, I received a impression where the Lord, as I was tracting, I remember hearing almost like I had heard a voice, I remember as hearing a voice saying, see, I told you would make the right decision. And I was like, oh, he wanted me to make the choice so that I could learn that I could trust myself and my process of revelation as well. So it was an amazing mission. I met some incredible people, gorgeous. Oh gosh, Montana is so gorgeous. And yes,
yeah.
I noticed that Veronica had mentioned Kalispell. I love Kalispell. It's such a gorgeous area. I'd move there if I could. So that's kind of, I had some interesting companions, lots of interesting companions.
That's always right here. Everybody and their companions.
It is. I had some amazing sisters, just really stalwart, amazing sisters. And then I had one in particular, and you really couldn't blame her because she was foreign. She was struggling with the language. And I suspect there was some bipolar issues in there. And she and I had some interesting times. Like, she actually full on took a swing at me once. It was interesting. It was a good time. But
so how do you seriously hang out with someone like 24/7, never really leaving them if they're like trying to take you out? Like, how do you do that?
You don't. So that night she was struggling anyway, because she was from Montana or Mongolia. There, a lot of Mongolians get sent to the Montana mission because I think they said it's on the same latitude, right? Latitude. Anyway, terrain's the same, weather's the same. So they send a lot. And for her, like I said, in Mongolia at the time, especially, because this was back in 2003. And for her, the church was fairly new in Mongolia. So retention work and less active work isn't a thing for them. And it really frustrated her that we were doing so much retention work. And that's when her frustration kind of began. And I remember we were sitting in a member's house, and it was a part member's house, and her husband was finally ready to hear the gospel. And in the middle of talking with the wife, my companion stood up and walked out of the house. And I was like, what do you do? Because you're supposed to, you're supposed to. And I was like,
I'll be right
back. So I go out and I'm like, sister, you can't do that. You got to stay. We're in the middle of a meeting. You can't just walk out. And she was like, no, we go. we go. And she just starts walking. And I ran back to grab my stuff and I'm like, I am so sorry. We will reschedule. I don't know what's going on. I am so sorry. So we walk over to our dinner appointment, which was next. And we enter into the house and we're talking with the members and we're talking about, they were the ward mission leaders. And we're having this conversation. And again, she walks into the next room and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And so I went into the next room with her and I'm like, sister, what is happening? What is going on? And she goes, you hit me. And I'm like, what is happening? And luckily the wife of the ward mission leader had followed us in and she was standing in the doorway and she's like, no, she did not hit you. And I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I don't know what is happening. This woman's having a breakdown on me. What am I going to do? And so we went home. And that was honestly the only time my entire mission, we went into the apartment and I walked into our bedroom and I shut the door. And I explained to her first, I said, I just need a few moments, please. And I just wanted to say a prayer and I bawled. I'm like, I just want my mom. And so I was praying and she starts banging on the door and she's like, sister, you can't leave me. You can't leave me. And I finally let her in and I'm like, what is going on? And she's like, why you want to leave me? Why you don't love me? And I'm like, I do love you. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, look, I really think we need to call the president. And she goes, no. And I'm like, no, we really need the president. She walked over to the wall and she ripped the phone out of the wall.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
And that's the only time I ever left my companion. I walked across the hall and I was like, I need to use your phone, please. And I left the doors open between us, but oh my gosh, it was an experience. And so the president left us. He had the ward mission leader come over to our apartment and the president left us together for a couple of days. And she didn't talk to me much during those 2 days. And we went out, we did the routine, but it was not effective. But shortly after, he transferred both of us. So we got whitewashed. And I ended up in Wyoming and she ended up, I don't know where she ended up, but yeah, that was probably the craziest experience I had. But
you don't really know what was behind all of that other than just maybe she was emotionally struggling or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds like she was suffering from abandonment issues because she's like, why are you leaving me? She's ripping the phone out of the wall. I mean, I think a lot of people in this group, they probably are divorced because they were with people with like issues about abandonment issues, which is usually generally like part of a borderline personality disorder, a fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
I know my ex was suffering from that, and she used to lay behind the car and not let me leave the garage when she was getting in these big fights, and she would not let me leave because if I was going to leave, it was somehow perceived abandonment. Yeah. She would lay behind the car and not let me leave. So it was
I absolutely agree. I figured she had that, and honestly, each companion I had, especially, I had some really tough ones. And at the end of my mission, I remember sitting in my interview with my president, and he's like, we discussed this. He said, do you know why I gave you the companions I gave you? And I was like, please enlighten me. Because
I would like to know.
Yeah. And he said, you were the only one who could handle them. And
that's no good. No bueno.
But it prepared me a lot. Because, and I won't go into a lot of details with my marriage, but it prepared me a lot for my marriage and things, and realizing what I could handle and what I couldn't. And I didn't realize at the time how much it would prepare me for the next 13 years. So I don't regret it. And I'm really grateful that I had those experiences with those sisters, because I also learned to love and try to see it from their perspective instead of just being in my own, my own perception and filtering things through my own understanding. So it was a good thing, but it was definitely had its moments.
Wow.
Well, it did prepare you. I mean, that's always, they do say a mission prepares you. And, one thing I find interesting in the church is is we're so eager when we hear things like in the church that it's always like one-sided, it's 100% positive. It's like your mission is going to make all your positive experiences are going to make you have a positive marriage and a positive life. And it's like, no, sometimes the struggles in your mission make you prepare yourself for, later on in life. And, it was the same for me. I had some companions that I struggled with, and, it did make me a very patient guy, because I know when I started my mission, I was a very impatient guy. And I wanted to punch a few of my companions, but by the time I was at the end of my mission, I just, as angry as they made me, I still loved them and didn't want to punch them. So it did soften me. And then, like you said, you get in those crazy relationships, and
it does. It definitely helps you. It broadens your perspective. It really does broaden your perspective. So, yeah.
Well,
I know that, so you talked about you had 4 kids, and that you are divorced. Do you want to just give us a quick rundown of that area of your life?
Sure. So I was married for 13 years. I actually met my ex-husband in California. His dad was my seminary teacher my senior year of high school. And when I moved to California, he was on a mission. And I had heard all about him. Like, he was infamous. He'd blown up a toilet in high school. And so I had always heard this man's name, but I'd never met him. But his dad was a phenomenal man. Like, in fact, okay, my first 4 years of seminary, I spent sleeping. Like, there are lipstick marks and makeup marks in my seminary scriptures, because it was like face down. But my senior year, the way his dad had taught the gospel, it just really resonated with me, and it really changed the trajectory of my life. And so when he got home, I met him. I was still in high school. And I left for college. I went to BYU, Idaho. And when I came home a couple of years later, I remember I was getting ready for church one day. My sister had begged me to go with her to the singles ward. And so the first day that I went to the singles ward, she was like, come with me. And I remember, as I was getting ready, feeling the thought entered my head, Josh Wardell is going to talk to you today. And I'm like, well, that's a weird thought to have. And sure enough, after a sacrament meeting, this guy comes bounding up. And I remember in high school too, thinking, gosh, she's really cute. And he comes up and starts talking to me. Well, first he starts talking to my sister. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. And then he turns and he's like, you were in my dad's seminary class. And yeah. So we chatted briefly and he left. And my sister turns to me and she's like, he has never talked to me before, ever. And I'm like, okay. So he and I started dating that summer. We get married after my mission. So we dated on and off for about 5 years. And yeah, it was, I probably should.
Rocky.
What was that?
Should that have been
Rocky?
Yeah, it was. Well, he had the kind of personality too. He's one of those guys, you either love him or you hate him. And I always was vastly amused by him. Like, there was something about him that just drew me in. And then it was a little rocky before we got married. And I honestly never should have married the man. I mean, I'm grateful I did, obviously. I have 4 beautiful children, and I learned a lot from my marriage, a lot. But I knew better. I knew better. But at this point too, I had 2 proposals and I had turned them both down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really pushing my luck here. And so yeah. So we were married for 13 years. There were a lot of struggles, like, it didn't even start, you guys, our honeymoon started out with us fighting 24/7.
Wow.
Like, it was not a happy marriage. I mean, we had happy moments, but it was not a happy marriage. And by the time, I remember throughout the course of marriage, I would ask the Lord, I would actually beg him. I'm like, am I done? Please just let me be done. And the Lord always gave me the option. He'd be like, well, not yet. And I remember receiving a blessing that if I would stay, I would be very grateful. And then, of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that must mean that it's all going to be happily ever after, right?
Yep.
And then there was another 4 years between that blessing, and we ended up moving back to Idaho. We were in California at the time. We had our last two children. I have two boys, two girls in that order. We had our girls. And I remember when things got especially bad, the Lord finally telling me, it's time, you can go. And I remember him very distinctly telling me that this wasn't just for me,
Right.
that this was that our road together had come to an end. It was both for him and his progression, that he could no longer progress with me and I could no longer progress with him. And there was a lot of peace with that. And so that blessing I had received really did, it was on point. I was grateful I stayed, because if I had left at any other time, I always would have questioned. I always would have been like, did I give it my all? Did I really put in everything I could have put in? And I knew at that time that I had given everything that I had. And you can't change. You can't change people. You can't expect people to change for you. And he made his choices. And so he is now remarried. And so my kids have an amazing bonus mom. She really is a good woman. We have our struggles, and that was a hard thing for me. I don't know how many of you out there have where your kids have a step parent, but that one was hard for me to swallow for a little while. But I recognize her as an answer to prayer as well. I had prayed that my kids would both be kept safe and that they would feel loved during the divorce and after. And I was complaining one day about her because she kind of stepped in, almost usurping that motherly space. And I was talking to a friend and he's like, but does she love your kids? And I was like, yeah. And that night I went home and I was kind of complaining to the Lord, and the Lord has rebuked me a few times. He always does it very lovingly, but I remember hearing again a voice saying, Lexie, you asked me to bless your children. You asked me to help them feel loved and to help them feel safe. She is the answer to that prayer. And I thought, okay, I will.
That's amazing. I love I love that you brought up the timing thing, because my divorce, or like the downfall of my marriage, took 6 years from beginning to end. And probably at the midway mark, I kind of knew it was over. Like I kind of, like, the Lord was like, yeah, this isn't going to go anywhere, but it's not time yet, like to divorce. And so for years I just kept hanging on, and I knew I had the confirmation that it wasn't going to work out, but his timing was still, yes, I know, but you need to hang on. And I don't have my answers yet as to why I had to wait, the full 6 years. But I do hope at some point I can look back and be like, okay, there was a reason I had to get to that point, or maybe it was for him, or maybe it was for our kids, or I don't know. I'm not really sure what the storyline is going to be, but there was a definite answer. Yes, this is going to be over, and don't feel guilty. I want you to be happy,
Yeah.
but just not yet. And so I'm always intrigued. Like, I thought most people are just like, I know it's over, and we're done. And so I liked how you were telling that there was that timeline, because that's what I
Yeah.
experienced as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's a common thing that happens to most of us. And I think it has to do with the fact about the gospel, about, having that the gospel principles in our life, and knowing that we have prayer and that the Holy Ghost speaks to us and guides us. And, the rest of the world doesn't have that. And so I think it makes us a unique community. I think that people all probably agree, that are on here watching, that, we've all had our, grievances. I've had people ask me that weren't members of the church why I stayed so long.
Right.
And, I was married for 22 years, and, like Celeste, it was probably the last 3 years I knew it was ending. My oldest was off to college. My youngest was finishing his last year of high school, wanted to go on his mission at 18, right out of high school. And so I knew things were wrapping up, and, it was sad and it was scary, and but also it was kind of, I felt the relief that,
Yeah.
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 No, I agree.
Moment, I'm sure we've all, probably anyone here in this audience, or anybody who's ever had a divorce, like, there comes that time, at least for me, it was like this moment, like I was struggling, and I just received like one clear answer. And then it was like, oh, like I could breathe. I'm like, okay, it's still hard, but now I know
Mhm.
it's okay with you as well, Heavenly Father. Whereas before, I think I was struggling with, is he going to blame me? Have I given it my all? Have I done everything I can? And at that moment, that one moment, it was like, it's okay. You're going to be all
Yeah.
right. I love you. I want you to be happy. And that there's a shift there. So
Yeah.
still hard on my toes, everybody, but
Well, what was interesting too about all of that is I remember also feeling like timing has been everything throughout all of this.
yeah.
I remember feeling in that shift as well. The last probably 6 months before the divorce took place, I felt more support from Heavenly Father than I had felt
Yeah.
my entire life. And I knew in looking back on that, seeing all the little ways that he had prepared me and that he had supported me and the little miracles that took place, like it was incredible. It was incredible to think of and watch the process.
So do you have people, if you share that with people, like other members of the church, do you ever feel like they're looking at you like you're being blasphemous, that you're saying Heavenly Father said it was okay to divorce? Like, I kind of feel like sometimes people look at me like, would he ever let you really do that? Because all things are possible with God. So surely he could have fixed that, right? Do you ever get
Right.
people that look at you that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. In fact, it was a really interesting process. Divorce sucks, as we all know. I lost a lot of friends actually through the divorce. I had one friend in particular where she very much couldn't understand, and she used that exact phrase all the time. All things are possible with God.
Yep.
Anything, heck, I used that phrase at one point in my
Yep.
marriage where I'm like, no, God can fix this. God can
I
make this
was,
right.
I convinced myself that. I'm like, he can fix this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say that it was a marriage counseling that I went to, and it was an LDS marriage counselor.
Mhm.
And that was my hang up too. I'm like, am I not giving it my all? Because when marriage counseling broke down, because everything started pivoting to my ex and her issues, and it wasn't going her way, which was all about me and fixing me. um, I started seeing the therapist one-on-one to kind of deal with like recovery for me. But once and that was my issue. I'm like, am I divorcing? Am I doing something wrong? Am I giving up? Am I not? And she looked at me and she said, look, your ex does not have a mental problem. She has a personality disorder. She knows how to choose right from wrong. And she chooses not to get well. And she chooses not to try to make things work. And
Yeah.
so she exercised her free agency, and I had to exercise mine. And because we have free agency, God will support us in our decisions. He'll support us in our choices.
Yeah.
Whether outside people think it's wrong, they don't know all the details of what's going on inside the marriage.
Right.
And so I
Right.
think when people understand that free agency is the ultimate, it is the ultimate of God's gifts. And he'll never go against your agency. He'll never force you to do anything. And sometimes we make our choices, and sometimes those choices are bad, but he still supports us and he doesn't abandon us. And that's something we have to understand. And
Yeah.
not everybody in the church gets that. There's a lot of people in the church that still thinks that God's going to force things on us,
Yeah.
force us
Right.
to do things.
It's like a culture, like, and that's what I struggled with, was the LDS culture when it came to the divorce. It wasn't, if I would have researched what the prophets had said, if I would have solely just focused on the feelings and the inspiration I was receiving from the Spirit, I would have been so much better off than the culture that was surrounding divorce and my fear of, again, not letting the Lord fix something that he obviously can. But as it's being said in the group chat, as what we were just all saying, like, agency messes with that. The Lord's not going to come in and just take the other person's agency away or our agency away. He's going to let
Right.
it play out. And for me, I struggled a really long time, and he's my dad, and he was like, I don't want you to struggle anymore. You've tried, and you deserve to be happy. And
Yeah.
that was a great moment. It's a good
Yeah, I think the misnomer, this is the hardest concept. Agency and choice is the hardest concept, because go back to 9/11. You hear people all the time say, how could God
Right.
allow that to happen?
Yep.
And my answer is because the people flying those planes had agency.
Yeah.
And it just blows people's minds. They're like, what?
Yeah.
There's no way God would let that happen. I'm like, look, a guy who chooses to drink and drive down a street and kill a family, he chose to do so. I mean, sometimes there's intervening matters. Sometimes, angels can step in and do certain things. But again, God set that agency, and he would cease to be God if he broke his own laws, if he broke
Right.
his own commandments, his own rules that he set up. And agency was something that he promised us. He will bless us, he will support us, he will help us, but we have our agency.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is one thing I really have enjoyed about reading through the Doctrine and Covenants and some of the history right now. Like with Martin Harris in the 116 pages, Joseph was able to exercise his agency. God warned him. He gave him 2 warnings, but then eventually he says, do as you will. But he also made it 1,500 years ahead of time. He made a way for him to come out of it.
Well, the Lord knew it was going to happen. He knew that Joseph Smith and Martin Harris were going to press him, and he knew he had to let them make their free agency choice. And he said, you know what? And I have a feeling it's going to go badly. So I'm going to have Nephi rewrite and retell the story that we're going to lose in the future. It's amazing.
Exactly.
He sees it all, and he'll make sure that scripture, that the Book of Mormon will still come forth, and that story will still be told. I'm sure Nephi was like, so you want me to create a second smaller set of plates and tell the same story?
Yeah, he's like, wait a minute, this is really tedious. You want me to make another set? Forever.
And I got to tell about the tree of life and that whole story about the great and spacious building again. Like, really?
Well, and what I love about that is not only did he allow for the agency, but think of the learning opportunity Joseph Smith had. He went from a position where and this is what I love about Joseph Smith and the Doctrine and Covenants is we watch him move from perception where he sets himself as the standard. He sets himself as this person where he filters all his experiences through. Like with Martin Harris, he never had a friend before. He had at one point, but he had experienced so much persecution. And so he kind of is swayed by his one only friend right now. And the Lord takes him and he says, okay, this is what you were experiencing. This is what you're filtering your information through. It's you, it's man. Now expand your perspective. Look at it eternally. And we watch him go through that process over and over and over again until he finally gets it. And I feel like he does the same for us. That we mire ourselves in our own perception. And as we go through these experiences and use our agency, our perception slowly transitions into perspective, eternal perspective.
That's right.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so you wanted to be a seminary teacher. You obviously have a very deep knowledge of the scriptures. So why don't you let us know what your favorite scripture is or your favorite scripture story? Like, what is the most important one for you?
Okay, favorite scripture story. So it's actually 2 different things. Favorite scripture story is Lahontai, Book of Mormon. And for those of you who don't remember, Lahontai is actually a Lamanite captain of the army. And when Amalickiah dissents from the Nephites, he goes and he tries to convince the king to attack the Nephites after they've made an oath not to. And Lahontai says, no, I won't do it. And he takes half the army and leaves. And I love the story because Lahontai starts out super strong. Like he is solid. He's going to honor that oath. He goes, he takes the army. Amalickiah follows, after making a deal with the king that he would be put in charge of the armies. He goes, he meets Lahontai, and especially the story where Lahontai is encamped on a hill. And Amalickiah asks him to come down. He asks him to come down 3 times, and Lahontai won't come down. And he finally says, okay, look, I'll meet you halfway. You can bring your guards, come on down. We'll strike an accord. And he does. And he convinces him, hey, you come surround our armies. We'll surrender, but you got to make me second in command. In the end, Lahontai dies. And I love that story because it reminds me that you have to be aware. Like even coming down a little puts you in a precarious situation.
I like that.
But that story has always struck me a great deal. My favorite scripture is Doctrine and Covenants 127 verse 2. And this goes back to the whole perception versus perspective. Because in Doctrine and Covenants 127 verse 2, Joseph Smith talks about how deep water is what he's want to swim in, and that he, you know, for whatever end, for good end or for bad, this is his life, that he has had tribulation and struggle, but he has learned to be like Paul and to glory in his tribulation. And I feel like that is the moment where Joseph finally learns eternal perspective, that he realizes that whatever it is that he's experiencing in this life, there is a larger, grander scheme to it, and there's purpose to it. And that, because I mean, Joseph lived a really hard life, but yet he still found joy and peace. And I love that. And that honestly, for me, that scripture is my personal definition of what it means to endure to the end. The end to me isn't the end of this life. It's not like white knuckling it and you know, just eking your way through. To me, it's learning to find joy in all things, even the hard things, and learning that God has your back no matter what. So those are my two favorite.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really personally have been trying to like more embrace the thought of like long-term thinking, like eternal perspective. Because I guess when you go through a divorce, maybe I just needed that. I needed to be like, in the long grand scheme of things, there's going to be happiness on the other end of wherever, right? And I think that it's interesting because I was reading a book about like kindling your anger or not becoming angry. I can't remember what the name of it is. I can't see it from here. But it's not a church book, but it's that same concept where it's like if you get stuck in the here and now, you're going to get angry, you're going to get upset. But if you think long term and say, is this really worth getting upset about in the grand scheme or in the internal, you know, concept of just how, I mean, will it really matter in the eternities? Like it just makes everything so small. Like everything, like even like right now there's some family drama going on and there's some things that aren't true about me being kind of stirred around. And some people are like, well, why aren't you saying anything? I'm like, you know what? I mean, they can believe what they want. It's not true. I know it's not true. The Lord knows it's not true. And in the grand scheme, at some point, they'll find out it's not true. And, you know, it's up to them. I don't want to get so stressed and upset about it when it's just going to mess up. It's not going to hurt them if I'm upset, right? So, yeah, great concept. I'm really embracing that lately. So,
have you read the book, The Four Agreements?
No,
Who is that?
But I can add it onto my list. I got a good old list.
It's a really short book. And one of the agreements is that what other people think of you, good or bad, is basically none of our business. Like it has nothing to do with this because it doesn't change our worth. When I finally embraced that, like I had some dating experiences shortly after my divorce. I seem to keep attracting the same kind of guys at that time. And I finally was like, I don't want to go through this again. And when I embraced that thought that, like you said, it doesn't matter what they think. I know what is true about me. God knows what is true about me. And I need to just embrace the person that I am and not worry about, I don't need the validation. I don't, you know, what people have said doesn't matter. What people, in fact, at that time, especially I was going through, it was when my ex was getting remarried and his family, or not his family, his wife's family was indicating that there was some abuse issues in our marriage and they were indicating that I had lied about it. And it really was bothering me at the moment. But as soon as I was able to embrace that, oh my gosh, it was so freeing. Yeah. It was so freeing. It left me, you could just be you and it doesn't matter what others think.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. It's really good book.
So Alexia, I have somebody has a question in the chat room. I'll read it so everybody you can answer. It says, what if patriarchal blessings and perspectives and perceptions of patriarchal blessings. And that's an interesting question, because I've read my patriarchal blessing, and now being a divorced member of the church, I read it. It bothered me at first, but then I started looking at it from a different perspective. And I want to hear yours before I share mine.
So I have two thoughts on that. One, patriarchal blessings are a fascinating thing to me. Because I remember when I was serving on my mission, prior to my mission, I didn't read it and hear or read anything in there that indicated I would serve a mission. But while on my mission, the whole thing, minus the bit about my children and my husband, the whole thing was about serving a mission.
Really?
And I read it now, I can't see it. I don't know what I was reading on my mission. I really feel like eternal perspective, where patriarchal blessings are concerned, that it's not just for the here and now, but it's meant to help put our perspective in that eternal range. I know for like me, I am told just enough about who I was before I came to this earth to give me enough reassurance that I am the same person that I was then. I am told enough about my gifts and abilities in this life to have a pretty good assurance as to what the Lord is going to do in helping me reach the measure of my creation. And I feel like I am told just enough that extends into the eternities. But like you said before, we still have our agency. But I feel like we get mired, especially in the dating world. We get mired in the interpretation of things. We want our interpretations to be what we want them to be. And I have come to learn that that isn't always the case. Like the way the Lord sees some things isn't always the way we see it. And so I've had to learn to expand my perspective in that regard.
Well, I think it's interesting you said, because I've talked to some friends that were struggling with divorce, and I think it's so hard for us because I told him, I said, I believe we try to put our earthly culture, and I call it earthly culture because we have no idea what celestial culture was like. Like,
right.
We're on earth and we're like, well, heaven must be just like it is on earth. We must have linear time. We must, have, different countries and borders or whatever. It's like we try to put these concepts of earthly culture into celestial culture, and they just are completely apples and oranges. And so I think when we read our patriarchal blessings, we're reading them like, well, I'm growing up and I'm meeting my person and I'm serving a mission, then I meet my wife and then I get married. It says I'll be fruitful and have many children, but I only have two. So, I must be failing somewhere in my pursuit of living up to my patriarchal blessing. But, like you said, if you have that eternal perspective, you're like, this time on earth is only supposed to be like kindergarten. We have the eternities to progress, to go to like high school and college of the celestial worlds. And maybe that patriarchal blessing is not just for earth, but it's for our eternal journey. So I don't know, that's just my perspective. I should just put my disclaimer that anything I say here is not, don't consider gospel. It's Corey.
This is the gospel.
It's Corey's personal thoughts.
Yeah.
I am not spouting like some gospel. I don't want you guys to go, Corey's teaching false doctrine. I am not. I'm telling you my perspective.
They're going to go up to the pulpit and start sharing. Okay.
I'm going to get excommunicated next week.
So it's valid. I'm sharing it.
It'd be like Corey's teaching falsehoods. Yeah.
Right. I want to share an experience really quick too that I find fascinating. I find myself mulling over a lot. So my patriarchal blessing talks very specifically about the kind of man I will marry. My ex-husband was not that man. He was not. But I also had an experience also on my mission. So before I got married, that indicated, and I won't go into details, but I was shown two different scenarios of my married life. And at the time I interpreted, this goes back to interpretation again. I interpreted it to mean that if I chose wrong, then my life would be one way or another. A year ago,
it's not a fortune telling. It's not some kind of like tarot cards. You're like, oh no, we're going to flip the deck today on your patriarchal blessing. No, I don't think it's like that at all.
Right. Well, what was interesting about this experience, I had left it to that interpretation because I was shown in one scenario what life was like. Like I could see, I couldn't see his face, but I could see the man I was married to. I could see my children, or at least their general ages. I couldn't see faces of anybody in this except my own. But in the quiet moments, my heart was breaking and there was so much pain and I cried. I cried. And then another vision had kind of opened up to my mind where I could see, I knew it was somebody different. It wasn't the same man. The children were different. I think they were older. I still couldn't see faces, but in the quiet moments, I was very happy. Well, I was talking to a friend about a year ago Christmas, and I hadn't thought about this in years. And especially in thinking, because we were discussing also about patriarchal blessings and did we miss our shot with the person the Lord had, chosen for us, except I don't believe there is one person for us specifically. But I was talking with this friend and I was telling her about this experience. And in that moment, I felt the Lord whisper to me, I was not showing you what your life would be like if you chose the wrong person. I was showing you that there is hope after your first marriage ends. And I thought, how interesting the Lord was mindful enough of me and what my choices might be to show me that there's still going to be hope after.
That he still loves you. He's still going to guide you to where and who you need to be, which actually this is a great transition into our hot topic today.
There we go.
So it's about finding the one among the many. All of us here probably have realized that the LDS dating pool is very deep and broad, and there's a lot of people. And if you do get on these LDS singles pages, they're just all sorts of different types and personalities, and there's just a lot going on in there. So, so I know that you're in a relationship with somebody. So, how did you tell us that little story? And Steve is my gift war buddy. So
I know you guys are solid in
all
that.
the time. He's the only
makes me
person that can
smile.
beat me. I think if I was going to give him the crown, it'd be to him. But so. Tell us about that and how you were able to find him among these so many people out there, because you seem fabulous. I'm sure you had a lot to choose from. So,
well, and that's what was interesting. Like I said, at first, after my divorce, I started dating, and I dated a few people here and there, but I noticed I was attracting just the wrong people for me. They're good people, but they were wrong for me. And I had to really come to recognize.
Do we lose her?
Not just what I wanted, but what it was I was doing and looking for. And I decided to take about a year off of dating and just get right with me. And in that time, you guys, I became, okay, so some of my friends who are on here who knew me during that time are going to attest to the fact that I was a mess. It was like a straight up mess. Like the word date sent me into tears one day. There were these Marco Polo groups that I joined. That's actually how I got involved with the group that I admin or help admin. I joined one of the Marco Polo groups and I started getting to meet people. Well, after a while of being on there, it must have been around this time last year, somebody was putting together a blind Marco Polo date so that you would have a virtual date with somebody from one of the other groups. And a friend of mine was like, hey, are you going to do this? And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not dating. I'm not doing it. And I had dated a little more here and there, but they all were just weird and they freaked me out and I cut it off fast. I learned how to recognize when somebody was interested and I cut it off before it could even start. And so they were like, Lexie, it's just a date. I mean, it's just to get to know somebody. And I'm like, nope. And I full on had a meltdown, you guys. I struggled. And I had a very good friend who helped me through that a lot. He would talk with me, he'd get to know me, and he showed me that some of these trauma triggers, especially triggers that I had, he kind of helped me work through that a little bit, but I still had the walls up so bad. So then I get put into the 35 and Wiser group, friends just started adding me to some of these groups, and I've pretty much left some of the other ones, but I really liked the 35 and Wiser.
My
And I
favorite.
got, what was that?
I said it's my favorite.
It's my favorite too. So,
Mine
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yay!
it's a good group. It's a good group. And so when
If anyone in the audience is not a member of the Wiser group, go check it out. It's
you
pretty
should.
awesome.
I agree. So I started participating in that. And at first I was a lurker, you know, a friend added me and I was like, well, I'll just watch. And then I started participating and then I started interacting, but I still, you guys, I still would be like flirty enough. But as soon as anybody like actually showed interest, I like, or started messaging me, oh my gosh, I cut it off so fast. So Steve joined. I think he joined shortly after or before you, Celeste.
Okay.
Steve joined. And at that time I was talking to somebody else kind of. And I was talking to a few people, but I had no interest in Steve. So I was like, oh, there's this guy, and he was funny, and he produced really great comments, but what I was noticing about him, I don't know. I mean, I engaged minimally, but I hadn't really gotten to know him. I remember reading his profile. I remember commenting on the beard post that he made, but I didn't really engage with him. I kept everybody at a distance. Steve was really smart about the way he went about this. I posted that I was coming to Utah. I was just graduating from college. So I was taking a trip down to Utah to visit some friends. And I honestly was going down for a date with somebody else. And I was going to be down there for 4 days. And there were 4 different people who asked me out. And so I had my time pretty filled up. And Steve called me out on my post and he's like, so what are we going to do when you're down here? And normally that would have pissed me off. Like normally I would have been like, who do you think you are? But for whatever reason with him, I was like, okay. And I tried to ignore it. And he wouldn't let me. He's like, what did he say? I don't know.
Benny kept coming back.
He did. He was like, so, you know, are you, what are we, I forget what he responded with specifically, but I finally was like, are you asking me on a date? And he's like, yes. And so at that point I tried to act like I hadn't seen it. And at that point I private messaged him and I was like, okay. I ended up changing my travel plans. I don't know what it was about him because I hadn't really interacted with him before. And instead of messaging me first or trying to get to know me through Messenger, where I would have shut it down because that's what I do. In asking me the way that he did, I just felt like I needed to give it a try. So I rearranged my schedule so that I could come down a day early. And I was like, so the only day I have open is Tuesday. And he's like, okay, Tuesday it is, I'll take it. And I was even running late. You guys, I'm also, my friends will tell you, I'm perpetually late to everything. And so I was running late and we were going to dinner that night. At first he's like, what do you want to, do you like sushi? And I'm like, well, I've only ever had sushi once. And so, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And he's like, yeah, no, that doesn't sound like a good plan. So we went to steak. And this was what was funny. I have this thing when other people are purchasing meals for me, I get really self-conscious about the price of the meal. And so I'm looking at things and legit, I really did want a salad. But we go to this steakhouse and I order a salad, but the salad did have steak on it. And I'm feeling self-conscious about that. And he's looking at me thinking, why did I take this woman to a steakhouse when she's just going to order a salad? And
could have taken this to plantation. That'd have been better.
Yeah. So, but the conversation, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting a little more of a jokester or somebody who just didn't, I honestly think I was expecting somebody a little like my ex-husband. And when I got there, he was so adorable, and the conversation flowed. Like, Steve is honestly one of my favorite people to talk to ever. He just, I don't know, it's so easy to talk to him, and he makes me laugh in ways that I've never laughed. And he makes it safe. And it was interesting to me how comfortable I was with him almost immediately. And I even canceled other plans so that I could go out with him a second time while I was there. And so,
Wow.
yeah.
You
So
made a good impression. Good job, Steve. Awesome.
he
So how long
did.
did it take to get to that point where you felt comfortable accepting a virtual or a date from somebody you just met online?
Honestly, everybody else, like I said, I had talked to ahead of time. I would not accept a date unless I had had significant interaction with them. He is honestly the first person that I wouldn't. Okay, that's not true. I did end up, out of peer pressure, going on the virtual date from the polo groups. That was really interesting. It was funny, but it was interesting. We ended up watching a movie together virtually, but he spent the entire movie, he watched it from his bed. And he's like, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to be in my pajamas. Well, his pajamas it was a shirtless pajama. And so he's like, it was an amusing little thing, but I'm
So
like,
he was bare chested throughout the movie?
yeah, yeah. And then at the end, oh my gosh.
Sit here
That's
without
awkward.
on and watch this movie with you.
I was,
Did he at least have a nice body? That's like, because, sometimes the shirtless can look pretty bad.
honestly, I don't remember. I think he did. I don't remember.
Oh, that's why he's showing off his wares.
Something. Well, and I do this sometimes. I stuck my foot in my mouth because I can be a little naive at times. And he's like, so how was the experience? Was good for me. How was it for you? And I'm like, well, I don't normally go on a date with a shirtless man, etc. I don't remember exactly what I said, but whatever it was a major innuendo. And he's like,
Whoa.
it's just,
Whoa.
it was,
Yeah,
it
creeper.
was,
A little bit of creeper.
he actually is a really nice guy. He is a really nice guy. But there was no set. We tried to make a second date happen, but it never did. So Steve was the first person since him that I hadn't been talking to. And like I said, everybody else, I kind of had put up the walls. I very carefully crafted my conversations so that I could easily maneuver out of anything that felt uncomfortable or that could get serious. Steve didn't give me that option. Like I adore that man. I love that man. He is a good man.
Oh, that's good.
I do have to say I'm kind of surprised that he wasn't like funny. Like when you met, like, not that he's not funny, but you were saying you were expecting someone that was just kind of a joker or whatever. Like that's what I would have assumed him to be.
I don't, I mean, he made me laugh that night. He did make me laugh that night, but it wasn't like I had experienced him online. But that ended up being a good thing because, like I said, my ex rarely took anything seriously. And so I think I had it in my head that Steve was very much in the same vein. And so when we met and when we had the conversations that we had, I just remembered being really surprised and thinking, this man isn't who I thought he was. And it goes back to, so when we were talking earlier about expectations and kind of tying the Lord's hands, Steve is, I have learned, he is everything that I need. Like, I believe very heavily in meeting your own needs. He is everything that I desire and need. But he didn't come in the package that I thought it would come in. It didn't look like the way I thought it would look. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that he took a moment and took a chance and did things differently, because I would have missed out on something so amazing. Like, I honestly, you guys, have never felt so safe in my life. He has taught me things about myself and about the world. He's expanded my understanding. I mean, it's
Good.
hard it's hard for me to put into words sometimes, but I know he didn't come in the package I expected,
So
but he came in the package I needed.
that brings up the big topic that people love to throw around on these groups, like having kind of like preferences. I prefer this, I prefer that, I prefer this height, this look, this shape, this size, like whatever. Everyone has their predetermined preferences on who they are looking for. So it sounds like to me that you're saying, maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe go a different route. Maybe the person you're looking for isn't in the exact, doesn't check all the boxes that you're looking for.
Yeah, I
Do
did
we
the
limit
thing.
ourselves by doing that? I mean, that's a valid question.
I think we do.
Very valid question.
Yeah, I think we do. I remember, so I did the thing. I made a list, just like everybody else does after my divorce, of the things I wanted, the things that were my deal breakers, the things that, all of the things. And I have a friend who got married just before COVID hit. And when she got engaged, I was like, how did you guys meet? Like, how did this happen? Because it seemed to come out of nowhere. And she said, I was praying one night about just life in general and dating and all of the things. And she said, and I felt the Lord very distinctly tell me, if you would quit tying my hands, I could bring somebody into your life. And so she thought, well, what does that mean? The man that she ended up marrying, she had been friends with for years, but she had never considered him as a partner because he didn't meet her list, or at least he didn't meet it in the way she thought he should meet it. And I think we do. I think we set ourselves up sometimes with these predetermined ideas of what we think is going to make us happy.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But it doesn't.
From a guy's perspective, and the panel and I, Celeste and Everett, we were all talking the other day, kind of like, I think dating LDS in the LDS community is a little tougher than it is outside of the community, because I've met non-member women who saw me, and it probably has to do with my standards and how I was raised and my lifestyle. But they're like, oh my gosh, you are an amazing man. You're not out womanizing, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you're kind, and they go down the list. But then when I flip into like meeting women in these groups, it's like, they're like, oh, is he a pornography fiend? Is he all the bad things that their ex did to them, they're applying and looking at me with a microscope saying, is Corey that kind of guy? Is he going to crush me? Is he going to be a porn freak? Am I going to catch him at 12 o'clock in the morning on a computer? It's really a weird community. And I think that's why the topic is this, like opening up your mind, trying not to bring your ex into the mix, and try to look at people in a different lens, I guess you could say.
Don't you think there has to be a good balance, right? Because I think you do have to have certain standards, a certain span, within you will find your person. But I think it has to be wide enough to be able to have enough to choose from, right? And so, because I think you can either hinder yourself. Well, either way, going too big, you're going to find people that maybe aren't going to work for you. If you go too small, you're not going to have enough to choose from. So there's like a medium range in there that needs to be found. And I wonder, how easy is that? How easy it was for you?
I think the biggest key to finding that range and to finding your person is first starting with being honest with yourself. What are your triggers? There are two things that come to mind today. Actually, the first counselor in our bishopric got up and he was bearing his testimony, and he said, I don't think Jesus looks at our flaws and sees just our flaws. I think he wants us to be aware of our flaws so that we can repent and find that joy that we're looking for. But I don't think he's looking for our flaws. He's looking for our goodness, and he wants us to see our goodness as well. I would agree with that. We spend so much time, especially in LDS culture, looking for everybody's flaws, where everybody's chinks are, that we forget to see how much goodness there is to people. That is something that I've really learned over the last year, especially. The other thing that comes to mind is if we are not willing to be 100% honest with ourselves as to where our own triggers are, where our own insecurities are, then we're going to perpetuate in that and see that in other people. I have a friend, she's a minister in another church. She wrote a book about forgiveness, and I was talking with her once, and she said, you know, Lexie, not everybody has the skill or the will to meet expectations. And if they lack the skill, they will eventually lose the will. And I've been mulling that over a lot too, that the people that we look at, the people that we're considering for partners and for, you know, even engaging in conversation, if we're not first honest without our own ability, like take pornography, for instance, you brought that up, Corey. My view on pornography has changed drastically. And a large part of that is because my own son has really struggled with it. My ex, I mean, that was one of the worst things. It felt as bad as being cheated on, and I experienced both. It felt as bad as being cheated on. And so I thought just after my divorce that pornography was a deal breaker for me. And then I found out that my son was struggling with it. And everything that I experienced, all the emotions where pornography is concerned, completely changed. Because I don't look at my son and see, oh my gosh, a pornography user who's going to destroy my home. I look at my son as an amazing young man who has so many things to offer, who tries his hardest, and he got sucked into something that could be damaging to his soul. But I personally, I think you have to be willing to look at your own insecurities and your own, like, really, you can't control anybody else. So you got to look at what you have the skill to manage, where your capacities lie, deal with your own triggers. And then once you're able to face those, then you can look honestly at what other people have to offer. I don't know. Was that a little complicated?
No, it's a good perspective, because, you know, it's funny because, and I'll bring this comment up, and I'll ask you the question with it. But, you know, I have dated non-members, like when I was struggling to find an LDS woman that was interested in me or didn't have a lot of issues, or, you know, it's something that for me, it was, you know, that person thought I was amazing. They thought, why aren't we getting married? And for me, it was just because I really wanted to meet an LDS woman to get married to. And so how about you? Did you date any non-members when you were thinking about dating? Had you ever dated non-members?
I've dated a few. And for me, the biggest thing that it came down to, see, that was something else that was interesting. Going back to the patriarchal blessing thing, it's not written, but my mother, my grandmother, and myself all remember something indicated that was said when I received my actual blessing, that indicated that the person that I would marry would not be a traditional member. Either they would be a convert, or there would be something that would not look traditional. And I thought that was really interesting. So I dated a few non-members. And for me, it came down to seeking the same goals. These particular men, they were very short-lived, and they were really good, nice men, but the goals ended up being off, like their goals versus my goals. I know I want a temple marriage, and I have learned that to enjoy the journey. That I think that's another thing we really struggle with in LDS culture, is we're looking at the end game. We're like, nope, it's all about the marriage. If we're not, I think that's why so many people get married so fast too. We're looking at the end game. You know, can this person be my eternal companion? What about the journey? There are plenty of people out there that will teach you amazing things along the way. Some of those may be non-members. like learning to trust people again. I think it's good to learn to trust people, even outside of our faith, that maybe, people are just people. And those non-members did. They taught me that. They taught me to be open to things that I wasn't open to before. They taught me to see things in a perspective that I hadn't seen before. I had viewed everything through my lens of, this is what I'm told eternity has to look like, and trying to manage and control that, which I did a lot, especially in my marriage. I tried to manage and control a lot in my marriage. And I have since learned that my journey is my journey. Their journey is their journey. And
Right.
if I'm not going to allow people to experience their journey, that's like, I have no business
Well,
managing other
Satan's-
people's
that's
journeys.
Satan's
But,
plan, right? To take away everybody's
right. Yeah.
agency. So you don't want that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I think that's the struggle,
No.
is like knowing that, going back to what we talked about in the very, very beginning about free agency, like when we're dating or when we're married to somebody, understanding that they have their agency too.
Yes.
And, I remember during my marriage, my wife at the time, she's my ex now, of course, but she liked to go out and have girls' night, and she liked to go out dancing. And of course, it was only for girls only. And, inside I'm going, do I really want her out in a club dancing and getting hit on by men? And, every part of the natural man of me wanted to say, absolutely not, and be unrighteous in my dominion and my priesthood, and say this is a wrong thing to do, and I'm going to scold you, and I'm going to school you. But I let her go, and I let her do what she wanted to do. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, it came back to bite me, because she had affairs, and
Yeah.
and it was, I look back, should I have stopped her? Should I have tried to counsel her? And there was no counseling her. But it's like what you said, you tried managing so much in your marriage, and in the end it wasn't helpful. It didn't work. They still made their free agency choices.
Right. And agency, I do. People are going to make their choices regardless. I definitely think in a relationship, you have to be willing to have the conversations, but people are going to make their choices. It didn't matter. Like, I remember my ex received a blessing. And he was told in his blessing, if he didn't change his ways, he would lose his family. And I remember pleading with him and being like, please, please. Like, this is our eternity that we're working with, we're dealing with, please. Then in the long run, it has to be what he wants. Like, I couldn't want it enough for the both of us. And it's not meant to be that way, but it is meant to be a conversation. It is meant to be a partnership. But ultimately, you have to want to work together. You have to want and choose to walk
You can't
that road
force
together.
them to walk your walk. I mean,
Exactly.
you are both individual members. You have your own identity, you're working your own salvation out with the Savior, but you still have to do it as a team. It's so hard to be, you just, sometimes you wish your spouse would just be up to your speed, and it's tough.
Well, and I think that's the other thing too, up to our speed. Like, I will be the first to admit, I honestly saw myself on a higher plane than my ex. That was not okay. He had his own process. We were just at different points. I have my struggles. I have things that I'm still working through. It doesn't make me better. It doesn't make me worse. It means that my process is different than his. And I think if I could have accepted that a little bit more and not tried to force him into my process, and if I didn't have so much the end in mind, but I understood a little more that the journey was where the learning was at, I don't know that it would have changed or saved my marriage, but I think I would have definitely um, I had a different outcome for me. I think I would have learned some things that I probably missed along the way. Luckily, though, the Lord is gracious and he allows me to learn lessons over and over again. So,
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, it's always funny. You hear things in the scriptures, they're said 3 times sometimes in a row.
yeah,
I think there's a reason for that. Like, we just don't get it. You don't hear it the first time. Like, what was it again?
It's so true.
Well, in the comments, it was saying that, let's gather Israel by dating non-members into the fold. And it's interesting because I think there's a church culture that you just don't date a non-member. In fact, like my daughter who's at college, you just don't date someone who's not a return missionary. Like it's these random little rules that aren't really rules that we put into place. And I remember when
Cultural commandments. Remember, those are cultural commandments.
I like that term. I like that term.
There's the real commandments, the ones you have to go down the list for the temple, and then there's a bunch of cultural ones like wearing white shirts, not blue shirts.
Right. So I remember I had my friend down, and I was just starting into these Facebook pages, and she was asking how things were going and stuff, and I was giving her my experience, which probably wasn't the best experience, but she was like, because I said, so maybe I'm just gonna like branch out into different, like different pages or different dating apps or whatever, and she was like, oh, like non-members, and I'm all, I mean, yeah, maybe, and she was like scared for me, like for my life, that I would be even really willing to do that. But she was sincere. She was just like, well, Celeste, do you really want to do that? Because, and the funny thing is she married someone who wasn't of our faith. But this is my thought. This is what I told her. I said, this process for me, especially this time around, like the Lord and the Spirit's got to guide me. Like I'm not going to just go off going doing something crazy. But if the Lord guides me to someone who's a non-member, then why would I question that? He knows that person. He knows what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what his potential is, if he's willing to convert or not here or in the eternities, whatever. Like the Lord knows all. And so why am I being willing to narrow that gap? Now, I prefer obviously not to, I prefer members, but in that moment, I just remember being kind of like surprised by her reaction, that it was like she looked at me like I was just about to jump off a cliff or something, because I was contemplating joining non-member apps. So it's crazy.
I'm gonna
there's a friend. What was that?
Go ahead. You were gonna share a story.
No, I was just thinking about a friend of mine too, who was talking about something similar. I really think when you're looking at the character of a person, yeah, you have a greater chance of like temple marriage if they're a member. But I think it really comes down to the character of a person. I have a girlfriend right now who did date a non-member for quite a while after her divorce. And she loves him dearly. He loves her dearly, but they had decided to break it off because they could not get beyond the religion thing. He wasn't going to be joining the church anytime soon. It was really important to her. She learned a lot from that relationship. In fact, she doesn't measure other relationships per her divorce or her ex-husband. She measures it against him because he just is a good man. But ultimately it came down to what her bottom line was, what she wanted. And I think that's really, again, it goes back to being 100% honest with yourself. What is your bottom line? What do you want? So, and then willing to look at other people as they are, because somebody could have the title of priesthood holder and be an absolute arse, they just, yeah.
So that's why it's like the Spirit needs to lead and guide. Like, I guess that's to my friend, I was like, in the end, if the Lord leads me to someone who's a non-member, then why would I question him,
Right.
Yeah. Hi, I'm going to finally jump back in here. Now that my kids are dropped off, my apologies for ducking out there. Everything kind of happened all at once. So I've tried to kind of jump in and get up to speed rather than just sort of jumping in midstream and not knowing what the heck we're talking about. But I think this is an interesting topic because, I get on the Facebook groups, and I think it's interesting how many people I see posting essentially a litmus test for they have to be this way. And like you were saying earlier, that sort of boxes the Lord in like, well, I hate to break it to you, but the guy that would be really best for you or the girl that would be best for you may not have some of those qualities, but they would be best for you. I certainly am one that, I would say 100%. My picker was broken before, and so this time around, I'm like, all right, wipe the slate clean and just, Heavenly Father, look, if you want me to get married again, this one's on you. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Obviously, I thought I did, and I had my litmus test, right? She's got to be like this, and these things are going to be like perfect, and then it's going to be happily ever after. And I feel like in the church, we sort of set up ourselves for failure, especially when we get into a marriage, because we kind of tend to think that if they meet these certain criteria, especially when it comes to like worthiness or priesthood or whatever, that by that standard, it's going to work. And I can't tell you how many people I have seen get divorced and say, I don't understand why. They become bitter at Heavenly Father and say, it should have worked because I did everything right. Well, that's not necessarily true. You did everything according to your list, but you didn't necessarily do everything right. And maybe you did do everything right, but Heavenly Father is still not going to take away that other person's free agency. And so I think for us, like, I love getting on there and I see like the battles that go on with people who are like, I will never date a guy who does this. And then kind of like these backhanded comments of that people post, like guys posting about girls, like, listen up, girls. And then they'll post this little catchy meme or something like that. Or the girls like, oh yeah, look, guys, you should never do this. And I just think, if you're really just kind of letting go and not judging people, you're probably not going to have any of those tests that you're just going to say, okay, you know what? This person plays video games, or this person did this, or this person did that. I don't know what it might be. Everybody's kind of different, but maybe they do. And maybe Heavenly Father's like, it might not be quite what you think. So I love kind of just your approach that you're talking about of just whether they're a member or not a member, who knows? Some of the best members I know were non-members that were, essentially their spouse was a member. And for years, they're like, I'm not going to join your church. I don't care. I like my cigars and my whiskey or whatever. And the missionaries can come over and have dinner, but they better not talk about the church. One day they're ready. They get baptized. A year later, they're bishop. Then they're in the high council and they're just solid, right?
Yeah, my dad was a non-member my whole life. And 2 months before I ended my mission, finished my mission, he wrote me a letter and said, son, I'm getting baptized. And I was going to wait for you to do it. But the missionaries felt that I shouldn't wait 2 months if I know now. And I said, Dad, go for it. And he got baptized before I got off my mission.
That's awesome.
That was awesome. Well, the lady that was giving me like the glare, her husband, like I said, was not a member, but he had joined. And at the time when she was giving me the lecture, he was bishop. So I was kind of like, I mean, can you really say that this might, is not a good passage? Like, I know, but I've been down that. You don't know how it's going to turn out or whatever. But.
Well, it's true. I can think of 2 couples right now from my mission. One, their name is the Schlossers. She married him. It was both of their second marriages. And she married him knowing he wasn't a member. And he was almost anti at first. Amazing man. He ended up getting baptized, but it took a lot of miracles. And he still has his struggles. And she was faithful, but the church issue still was a big issue. But it was one that she was willing to go through because she received that confirmation that this was a good match for her, that she would find joy and happiness. The other couple I thought of as you guys were talking was there was a couple, the Brohas. He had been through 40 sets of missionaries. He was in his 80s. And finally, we were like, you've had all the discussions. Can we just read the Book of Mormon with you? And we're in the middle of Isaiah, of all things, the Isaiah chapters. And he just up and calls one day and says, it's true. I need to get baptized. And I'm like, 80 years. They had been married for like 60 of those years.
Right.
So, but it's something to bank on. And I definitely, or maybe we don't bank on, I definitely think if you're going into a relationship, you can't go into it with the idea that, well, I'm going to convert this person. They're going to change for me, whether they're a member or not. You have to be willing to accept them exactly where they're at. And if we can't accept them where they're at, then they're probably, it probably isn't going to work. That's kind of my thought on that.
I think you're right. I mean, it's interesting because we are our church is a church of converts, and I remember, so I was in the MTC when they were trying to teach us this concept of look at people with your spiritual eyes and understand that people are converts. And they did this little presentation, this pre PowerPoint, so it's probably on some slide projector, dating myself, but they showed a picture of this biker guy. He's sitting on a biker, he's a biker guy sitting on a motorcycle. He's got tattoos, leather, looks tough and rough. And they said, hey, you guys, I want you to think in your heart, would you approach this guy and ask him about the gospel? And I have to be honest, I was like, oh man, that guy looks scary. He'd probably punch me. and I said, okay, well, let me let you know that he was approached, he was taught, he was baptized, and now he's a bishop. And it was like, whoa, that's so cool. And then that reminded me of another story that I heard where a new convert moved from New York to Utah, standing in line at, what was it? When it was Cafe Rio, I think it was. And some older couple was standing behind, saw her holding the scriptures in her hand and saw her sleeve tattoos and said, oh, I see your tattoos there, ma'am. She's like, I guess you should have been reading those scriptures before you got those.
Ooh.
And she turned around and said, I'm sorry, I got these before I joined the church 2 years ago. And then the older couple was like embarrassed what they said because they just realized what they were saying, like how judgmental and inappropriate that was.
I was at a conference not that long ago. What is his first name? Perry. He's a professor at BYU. He was teaching us about God's covenant people. Really interesting because he was talking about how when God has his covenant people, we are blessed with the gospel because it is our calling to go and to share the gospel. But what has happened to Israel over time is instead of seeing us as a peculiar people in the sense where we are peculiar, we are to share, we are to uplift, instead we took what, that special thing, that thing that made us special, which is having the gospel, and instead of sharing it, we kind of hoarded it and set ourselves up to be elite. We became elitist.
We puffed ourselves up, like it always in the scriptures. We rose and we get destroyed, and then we have to be humbled, and then we come back strong, and then we get puffed up again, and
One of the worst things we can become, just as members, is when we start to become self-righteous and snooty. At the end of the day, it wasn't the wicked that crucified Christ; it was the self-righteous. Right. And if we get to that point, we're in a lot of trouble. Going back to people who were part member families. I mean, look at Elder Bednar, right? Yeah. When he went to baptize his dad and confer the priesthood on him. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. We should always have our radar on. I don't live in Utah, so maybe it's more difficult for me to empathize with that kind of a situation where I go to school, for example, and like 95% of my class is LDS. And so you don't have that thought process of, okay, I need to be looking for people to share the gospel with. Here, I don't know, some people call it like the mission field, right? Corey's out in Washington, D.C., Celeste is in Texas, the promised land. And, I'm in the toilet bowl of America, Portland right now. So I'll admit it kind of sucks here, but, there is plenty of opportunity for us versus those who kind of grow up in the gospels everywhere already. And I guess maybe for us, it's kind of a different sort of feel. It's a different expectation, maybe.
Well, I think especially in talking about that elitist, we do that in dating. We think that because we have what we have, that we automatically dismiss others. And you're right. Especially, I have a really great friend. I don't know if she's still on here tonight. We talk about this a lot. There just are not that many LDS people where she's at. She's a good, righteous woman, and she has a lot to offer. And if she's looking at only LDS men, and it doesn't look like she's moving, in the immediate future, even though I keep trying to convince her to move out this way, that's like, she would never date. She would never really date if she wasn't willing to open her options. Now, that doesn't mean she does, because she knows what she's looking for. But you've got to be willing to look at what there is available and look at people as they are. I mean, we're all God's children, every single one of us.
He loves all of us. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we have a question from Ryan.
Mhm.
So Ryan wants to go and unmute himself, turn his camera on.
I thought you were just going to pick me out of the chat.
No.
All right. So one question that I kind of have, just kind of for everyone. So, so far, the four of you, I think, have all expressed that you all have kids. What about someone? So in my personal case, I've not been married, don't have kids, but I think I'm a pretty decent guy. So I feel like that there's maybe that's an obstacle I have to overcome, or feel like maybe I have to prove myself that to someone who's like, well, I've been through a marriage and I've, raised kids or still raising kids. And so what can you bring to the relationship and stuff? And I feel that that's an obstacle for some of us that haven't been through that yet. And so just kind of curious what some people's thoughts were, on that kind of thing.
Well, we had this topic on, I think, Shasta's podcast, where it was like, are you qualified to be, because she's single. I mean, it might not have been Shasta, somebody's, but it was about,
No, it was Shasta.
Was
It was Shasta.
Okay.
I thought so.
It's like, am I qualified, like in your case, to marry someone who has kids? Am I qualified as a dad if I've never been a dad before? And I just think that, again, we're looking at that, or how narrow are we going to make our path, and of course, if you're a fantastic individual and you've got loving instincts toward children, you're going to be an amazing dad, no matter if they're your biological children or not, right? And if someone isn't going to view you that way, then then that's probably not the right person. But I can see the struggle. I know it's a struggle for people.
I was going to say, I wanted to validate that too, because I know that that's a struggle. I have a brother in his late 30s, never been married, doesn't have kids. And that's something he struggles with too. The experience I shared earlier about my friend who enlightened me as to expanding my view and not tying God's hands. She actually was one of those people where she wouldn't date. Part of the reason she had never considered this man that she ended up marrying before was because he had never been married and didn't have children. And so she thought, as a mom, that she didn't want to marry somebody or engage in a relationship with somebody who had never had children. And it wasn't until she dismissed that. I mean, he's an amazing father to her kids, like so patient, so good. And he's the exact man. Their dad isn't really in the picture, and he's the man that those kids needed. So I agree with Celeste. It may not be your person then, but there is somebody who will see that value, especially if you're expressing that.
Yeah, Ryan, my one of my coworkers, he married a woman who was divorced with 3 kids. He was in BYU, and he met her and he married her. She was about 5 years older than him. And he ended up marrying her and had 3 more kids with her. So he had 3 older stepkids and 3 kids with her. And it was pretty amazing. They have a great marriage and a great family, and all the kids get along.
Awesome.
Yeah, I sort of feel like if you're looking for the right person and letting Heavenly Father steer that ship, he's going to guide you to the person that will be right for you.
Right.
And it won't matter if you've had kids or not have kids, they're going to be accepting of you the way you are, and they're going to be a right fit, whether that is to have kids with that person or to help raise their kids, or maybe they've never had kids, but whatever the case is, if you're letting Heavenly Father steer the ship, you won't go wrong.
Right. And that's, that's my personal, that's where I'm at right now. It's just like, nope, you know what? I've tried to steer the ship myself. Clearly, you're better at this than I am. So just You got
Well,
it.
Brian, you seem like a great guy, and I hope some of the ladies on here will reach out to you and
That's
do a little
right.
friend request
Yeah.
because, yeah, you deserve somebody special. So
What's
I
your
just
Twitter
wanted to
handle,
love-
Ryan?
I just wanted to participate in the conversation, so thanks.
awesome. Thanks for the question.
Thank you,
Maybe
Ryan.
he should be on the hot seat.
I
He
know.
should sign
Well,
up.
Right.
watch out. I'll get you.
Sign up, sign up. So yeah, I think, this is an interesting point because there's so many people on those Facebook groups that come in and it's like they're trying to cram that square peg into a round hole. And they're like, well, I don't have these qualities, but you've got to like me. And those are the posts that probably I think are the biggest, like, oh, I can't even read this. I just have to get away from it. They're just toxic. When it's like, I hate a guy who won't accept me for X, Y, or Z. Well, maybe you're not right for somebody who won't accept that. So you should be accepting of yourself. And if somebody else doesn't accept you, check them off the list and move along. I
think that's go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, to me, that I see a lot of people who it's almost like they have, again, that litmus test and they just can't let go of it. And part of that is they've got issues within themselves that they haven't worked through. Maybe they're projecting things from past hurt and past situations where, they're just like, all right, if you do this, you're definitely going to be like my ex. And so therefore there's no way. It just doesn't work that way. And I can't tell you, one of the problems that I've had in past relationships, I don't want to get into it with my ex too much, but there's a lot of projections that come on to me from her father who just basically left, right? And I remember telling her all the time, my name is not so-and-so. I'm not that person. And in these groups, you're going to find a lot of people who just have not worked through their own selves yet, their own issues, and they get on there and right away they're creating those posts and they've got to meet these criteria. Instant turnoff. And that's just not going to be, you're going to find somebody who's going to meet 80% or something, and then they're going to have a couple of things that you don't agree with. Are you going to check them off the list if you feel like you're in love with them? No, of course not. So take the list, set it aside, have your basic principles, of course, but don't get so specific that you box yourself in. Anyways, I'm sorry. I get off my soapbox with my diatribe.
No. That was great. I had two thoughts with that. One, again, you're not getting married the first time you talk to somebody. Talk to people, get to know them. Like I said, I am so friggin' in love with my guy. I never would have imagined meeting him.
I'm sure you guys have already talked all about him before when I was gone, right? So
Oh yeah, we know all about him. We know the whole story.
All about Steve.
He's my gift for Betty. So.
Right.
Yeah, he puts all his guys to shame, Everett. He puts all guys to shame.
Oh, we should just end this now. We're done. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. Okay.
My point in that is, like I said, I never would have given him a shot if he hadn't just taken the chance. It's not marriage to start out with. It's talking, and then it's dating, and then it's a relationship, and you're working through stuff. I think we do ourselves a disservice of thinking, oh my gosh, can I marry this person right off the bat? Because we got to get to know people, and you never know. That person you may be getting to know might be exactly what you need in life. And you never would have known if you hadn't given them a shot, if you hadn't stopped projecting the future into the now. So that was one thing. The other thing that came to mind when you were talking, Everett, was Jen. I could never say her last name. It starts with a J. She's awesome.
Jen.
What was that?
Jen J.
Yeah, Jen J. She has often brought up the fact that we have this mentality that we are the best things since sliced bread, each of us individually. And that if somebody walks away from us, then they've lost the best thing that has ever happened to them. I know, my ex-husband, his current wife is such a better wife for him than I was. I know that without any doubt in my heart. I was not the best person for him. I was not the best thing for him. And I think we've got to get it out of our heads that we are the best match for everybody out there. We're not. There are some that are better than others. There are some that are equally as good, but we got to quit with the idea that A, we're getting married tomorrow, and B, because at that point you're just in love with the idea of being in love, or B, that you are the best thing since cake and, you know, everybody's missing out with you. Look for your person and do it with wisdom. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
No, I agree. I mean, Celeste and I have had this conversation a million times that I just, at this point, I'm kind of at the mindset of I just don't care. I'll reach out to people, you know, or before like would reach out and kind of talk with people, and hey, if it didn't work out, cool. You know what? Great. Good luck. Have a nice day. I see these people that get so worked up when it doesn't work out. And it's like, guys, it's because it's not right. And definitely the funniest thing to me is when somebody gets like upset, like a guy, you know, he reaches out to a girl and then she's kind of like, oh, no, thanks, I'm busy or something. And then he like explodes, right? You're like, oh, well, since you put it that way, let's go out on a date now that you're like totally raging on me. Cool. I don't know what you expect to happen in that situation. So it's kind of almost like just relax, let things happen, and let Heavenly Father lead that way. But definitely put yourself out there and then just let things happen organically. Either they will or they won't. But if they don't, it doesn't mean that that person is necessarily rejecting you. It just means that that person might not be right for you. And maybe they are rejecting you, which in that case, you should be thankful, because in that regard, they're not right for you again. And go find somebody who is.
Yeah.
My 2 cents. Anyways.
Which leads me back to Christina's, and I always quote this, but she's amazing. She's like, you know what? If I have to go through 100 wrong people to get to my right guy, I'm willing to go through 100 wrong people. She's like, just bring them on. Like, just let's get through this. Cause she's like, I'm not gonna, what if I give up on 99? And you know, the next person was for me.
That's that's great. And then, you know, being part of these Facebook groups, you know, there's like 1,000. So you got like plenty to sift through.
Bring on the millions.
True.
Through them all.
I tell you what, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what's amazing about these groups too is you can actually go through, get to know people a little bit through their comments, through the way they put their personality out there, and it gives you a base of just, you know, I think I take the Facebook groups over dating apps any day.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I don't even use, I got rid of dating apps a long time ago. As soon as I was with the Facebook, I like what you just said. Like, you can get to see their personality, their views on things. Do they get upset easy? Do they get aggressive and mean? You know, like, it shows their demeanor. And, you know, I've been known to post a controversial topic or two because
your topics are great.
Yeah, I know, aren't they? So just because I want to see the reaction, I want to see how maybe a certain person reacts, or it just as a whole, because I think it really shows who they really are versus some, you know, 2-sentence bio with 3 pictures, and you're like,
right,
I don't know this person from Adam. So yeah,
right.
I like them.
So I think you need to do a podcast and then teach people how to be genuine on Facebook, because sometimes people can post some stuff that's like right out of the playbook. It's like, you know, you're like, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, well, according to Joseph Smith. And you're like, no. According to you, I want to hear what you think.
Yeah. There's so much posturing that goes on in there. And sometimes you read it and you're just like, oh, gag. Seriously, just be yourself and stop trying to. My favorites are the ones where the guys are like, I will defend your honor, fair maiden. And I've actually seen that post and I'm like, did somebody just say that? Like, that sounds so corny. Like, what are you trying to do?
Or like the woman will say,
here's my knight in shining armor.
Yeah, he's the one for me. Yeah, you got to be careful of that, guys. Guys, be really careful. So we're giving you some advice here. Like, don't do that. Like, if a woman comes on and says, man, men just suck, don't come on and pile on and go, yeah, men do suck.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Right.
You look so cheesy if you do that.
The best though are the guys that receive the revelations, and you know, you're the one.
Always.
Yeah, those are kind of great. So
that's true. Yeah, I'm looking for a woman I could spoil and love, shower with money, let her do whatever she wants, and I will do all the chores.
Right.
Like, Yeah, that's gonna end badly.
Or they're just like, they reach out and say, like, the spirit has prompted me, like, you are the one. And they just start going down that path. Like, all right, cool your jets there, Romeo. Like, let's pump some brakes because you guys have never even met. So I'm pretty sure the spirit's not telling you anything of the sort, but
It's true.
Yeah. So for those Seinfeld fans out there, try to be the George Costanza. Don't be like George was being opposite George. I don't know if you remember that episode where George Costanza was being opposite George. So he walked up to a woman and he always told women he was an architect, which he wasn't. He always told women he was these crazy things, which he wasn't. So he finally decided to be opposite George, which was basically honest George. And so George showed up at the cafe and he went up to a woman and said, "Hi, I'm George. I'm unemployed and I live with my mom." And the girl goes, "How refreshing. Nice to meet you." And it was great because every time he was honest, he got a great job with the Yankees. He found an apartment. He was dating a hot girl. And It was pretty awesome. It's one of my favorite episodes about opposite George. So guys,
That's funny.
if you're fake, be opposite of yourself. Be real.
right. So Alexia, I can imagine
Authenticity is so important.
I can imagine as an admin
Yes.
in some of these groups, you've run into some doozies before. You've had some that you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, this is a new one, or this is kind of, wow, we keep running into this. So you don't have to share any names, but do you have any experiences that you're like, all right, there was this one time this guy or this girl did X, Y, or Z? Anything you'd be willing to share with us?
We mostly get things, people reporting other people. That happens a lot. And this is where it becomes, so I am one who fully believes, like, express yourself. I mean, we have certain standards and rules in the 35 and wiser that you need to adhere to, but express yourself. But oftentimes, in the expressing of yourself, somebody gets offended, especially, and I don't mean this to be rude, but especially those who are a little Molly Mormon or a little Peter Priesthood, have those tendencies. They get offended if somebody comes on talking about,
Sex.
well, sex for one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
always the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring
That's-
up that word.
But actually,
Such a
I
taboo
kind of want
subject.
to know the ones that are going to like freak out when you talk about sex, because those are the ones I don't want to date.
I might have to recycle
True,
that
it's true.
again. See what
It's
happens.
like reverse
Oh my gosh.
psychology. Or
You really do have great posts, Celeste.
Aw, thank
You really
you.
do. The other ones, we get a few. Mostly we deal with drama in the sense of we get a few who come in and like to stir up trouble. We've had some where it's a post about, oh, I want to be general. I really want to be general because it would be easy to figure this one out. Maybe it's a post about eye color or something, but there's, skin showing or whatnot. And so it's clearly not about the eye color. Those tend to draw a lot of comments that aren't always on that aren't always on the up and up. And so anytime comments start getting out of control or they start becoming a little more sexualized. Uh-oh. Are you guys there?
Yep.
Right.
Sorry.
You're there again.
My thing when I have 10% battery, I should probably go get my charger. I had to move rooms. I was going to keep this charged through the whole time, but my wasn't connecting in the other room.
So when you talk about eyeshadow posts, are you talking about ones where it's like the eyes are like up here and then there's like tons of cleavage? So it's like
Yeah.
eyeshadow and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Where they're attention seeking posts. So the attention seeking posts get tricky because they're not technically breaking rules. And if they're willing to edit like the posts, but those are the posts that just cause drama. And then people get offended when you're like, hey, will you edit your post? And they're like, what do you mean edit my post? All I was talking was eyeshadow. And you're like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
We're not stupid. So anyway, and then
Is there
people
like a
get
secret
offended.
sex language on the Facebook pages I don't know about? Because I'm like, what?
Corey's now Googling it for eyeshadow
I'm
posts.
like, what does eyeshadow mean?
Show me some of
We
these.
get
Oh my gosh, now I sound like a total prude, don't I?
We also get a lot of people who think that we are censoring everything that is shared, and that's honestly not the case. Like, that probably is the biggest thing we deal with as admins is there are attacks where people are like, you guys censor everything, you don't want us talking about anything that you don't agree with, and we're like, dude, we don't care about your opinion, just keep it within the rules.
Yeah.
Honestly, the group I work with, the 35 and wiser, they are some of the most chill admins.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've been around, but they are, and that's why the group is so good. They are some of the most chill admins you will ever meet. They're just good, solid people. But
Yeah, we had Terry on before.
yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. So
Yeah, Terry's pretty. She's money. She's good people.
Is Terry
She
is
is.
she on 35 plus or is she on Wiser?
No, she's on Wiser. Wiser
Oh,
was the group that Terry started.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's actually how I became an admin. I knew Terry from one of the Marco Polo groups. A mutual friend of ours put us into the 35 and wiser group. And after I had commented a few times, she was like, hey, I need another admin. Will you join us? And I haven't regretted it. I was a little hesitant.
I
What was
enjoy
that?
your comments. You have stellar comments. You know what because
Thank
I'm
you.
curious, do you have like a psychology background or something? Because you always seem to have a really level-headed, therapeutic kind of answer to things.
Oh, you're very kind.
Seems like you know your stuff. Like you're not like all
I
emotionally, imbalanced and stuff.
I try not to be emotionally imbalanced. I enjoy psychology, and I took several psychology classes, and I've even been mulling over the fact of looking into going into therapy, like as a therapist. But for the more part, I am a huge believer that if you are going to say something, do your research. Like, don't shoot from the hip and spew the emotional. Like, I've worked hard on me, so
There's a strategy about angry posts and angry emails. Something I practice at work, which works awesome. When you're super ticked off, man, go ahead and type that email and then leave it in the drafts for a night. Go home, go to bed, come back, read your draft. If you still want to send it, because then you can send it. But I'd say 99.99% of the time I delete it. I'm like, I got it all out the way I wanted it. I went home and slept, came back and went, whoa, I'm so glad I didn't send that.
right?
I've done that same trick with my ex at times, and I'm like, oh, I just want to hit that send button so bad. It's like,
leave it in the drafts.
And you're just walking around like, oh, I really want to go back there and hit that send button so bad. Like, that was a good reply. That one was like a real zinger. That goes over real well.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will admit, like, when there is a problem that needs to be solved, like, I don't know if you guys notice, I'm usually the one, like, when we have to address a topic that might be a little sensitive, I'm usually the one who posts it. Or if somebody needs to be dealt with, sometimes they're like, hey, Lex, will you respond to this person so that, and I don't know, I guess I'm a little diplomatic in that. So I can, yeah.
Yeah, you're good at it.
So, yeah. That's
Have you had people like threaten you and things like that on there? I mean, Terry told us about somebody who literally like found her and showed up at her house and was texting her or calling her, whatever they were doing, and they were standing in her driveway. She had to call the cops.
I have never had that. Like, I've had people message me, but like I said, I'm really good at pacifying people. And so I've had people message me. There was one friend of mine who recently got kicked out of the group, and he was being antagonistic a little bit. And he was like, I don't understand. I just got kicked out. And I didn't know he was getting kicked out. But I went back and I read some of the comments, and he screenshot some of it and shared it with me. And I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. But so most people who interact with me, I mean, I've had a couple of people. There was one guy I had to block because he was very antagonistic. And he had to be kicked out of the group because he was very antagonistic. In fact, he was mostly antagonistic with Steve, to be honest. It was kind of like, and I would at times be like, dude, just don't engage, please. And he wouldn't. He was really great about that. But he had to be blocked. both from the group and personally, because he got to a point where he was a little much. But I haven't had the crazy experiences Terry has.
Well, maybe you just handle it better, because I think Terry's kind of just like, yeah, whatever, kind of blows it off. It sounds like you kind of pull the psychology thing where you're like, all right, let's just kind of chill things out here. And Terry's like, yeah, whatever, kiss off. Yeah. And that just sort of like perpetuates the problem a bit, apparently.
It could, but yeah, I try really hard to pacify, and I don't back down. That's the difference. I mean, not between me and Terry. Terry doesn't back down either. I don't back down, and I'll call a spade, but I try to do it in a way where it's like where you can call somebody a jerk and they'll thank you for it. Yeah. That's the skill. So anyway, but I do try, and that's part of seeing people for who they are. I really do try to look at people and try to understand where they're coming from, and then address their concerns, give them whatever validation I can give them. And then yeah, I try to just smooth things over. So that's my role.
So what is your battery level now before we lose you?
Okay, it just gave me 10%. So I should probably go get my charger. And
go grab your charger.
Okay, I will be right back.
So we're coming up on a couple of hours now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it sucks because I feel like I'm just sort of hopping in at the beginning here.
Yeah, you want to go another 2 hours, don't you?
Yeah.
All right, so while she's away, is there anybody that have any questions? Want to raise your hand? Have any comments you want to make on video and audio? Raise your hand and we'll have you jump on and ask your question. All right, we got one.
So as soon as she gets back in, we will get you on there.
Okay, I'm here.
Hi, this is Stephanie. So
hi.
I just got into the meeting because I just saw on the Facebook post that you guys had a meeting. So I was just like, okay, let's just give this a try. So why not? I mean, I'm still single. It's Valentine's Day, so I mean, it's Valentine's month, so why not? It's Sunday as well, so I mean, I'd rather do something productive instead of watching a movie. It's still Sunday, so
right.
It's important.
Well, we hope you have found this enjoyable, maybe learning something.
I mean, I think what I've got the most is that there is a lot of it's nothing new that I haven't seen within the church when it comes to dating. Especially people are really I've seen people really afraid of taking risks. They don't go out of the way to ask someone out. There's really lack of initiative. Also, there's a lot I think people have unrealistic goals of who they should be looking for. Sometimes opinions get in the way, especially because we hear it from loved ones. And so that kind of gets in the way of like making a decision. So I think it's nothing new. The older people get, the more it is more difficult, because now people have all these traumas, and especially with dating apps, it just makes it 10 times more difficult because it becomes more about aesthetic than the actual experience. And then people have like unrealistic things of what they should what that person should be like, instead of the outcome of that they should be really enjoying and having a good time.
Right, which is why I think these Facebook apps that are for the singles work so much better than the dating apps, because you can see more than just what they look like in a few words. Like you can see how their personality, you can see the posts they make and how they view life, and it's really a benefit. So
yeah,
if you're only doing like the dating apps like on your phone, yeah, you're really missing out. I think if you have a lot of Facebook groups that are LDS, make sure you join. If you don't, that's what I'm saying. If you don't, then just make sure you join, because they're definitely a benefit.
Yeah, I think I've tried the apps, and I just haven't had much luck with the apps. So, and I have two complaints about the apps. Like, I do like the Facebook stuff because if I see a post from somebody, it was a clever, funny post. It kind of hit me. It struck me like, wow, that's something that really kind of struck me. I want to know more. I'll click on their profile and do a little perusing. And I'm like, wow, they like CrossFit. So do I. I like to do CrossFit, so it gives me more information than just like, wow, I saw 4 photos of the person and the photos happen to be 20 years old. Or they're all headshots, and we don't know anything about like anything else about them. So the apps are completely useless for me. And then the other thing is that you have to put in your age parameters. So I've met women that say I look younger than my age, but I never show up in their profiles because they're filtering to like 35 to 45, but I happen to be 51. So so I never wind up in anybody's stack for looking at. So at least on Facebook, they can kind of see that I'm a pretty active guy, and I'm not when they're just thinking 51, he's probably walking with a cane by now. So
I've taken a break from the app myself because I've just felt like a lot of these people that I was talking to, they weren't always genuine, and so they try to project something that they weren't, even in the conversation. And so there was this one person that got me to like take a personality test to see if we match, but I was like, why did you even swipe up if you don't want to match me?
Right.
Then it turns out that this person actually made the website and they wanted more users to click for clickbait.
Yeah.
Wow.
Another thing aside from the apps that I actually really enjoyed that led me to the Facebook groups was the Marco Polo groups. I know there's LDS Connections and there's another one too, but I can't remember what it was. But those are really great ways of getting to know people too, is because you're actually interacting with them, and it's harder to hide who you are when you're videoing. And with the group setting, it's really easy to get to know people in a casual way. So that's another area that I really enjoyed. I mean, that was actually a lifesaver last year. I got to meet so many amazing friends through Marco Polo groups.
Well, thanks, Stephanie, for your comments.
Yes, thanks for being here.
Originally when we
No,
put
for
this podcast together, the idea behind it was, you see a lot of people on the Facebook groups and they post things that kind of sound a little wonky, or maybe it's misconstrued, or you can't quite understand if they're being sarcastic or serious or whatever. And so you can't really get a good sense of what is going on oftentimes with people. And we thought, why not just bring them on the show, create an environment where you can talk with them for a while and really get to know them, talk about some issues, talk about them, find out about their personality. And then, some people will be like, hey, that person is fantastic. I'd really like to get to know them. And some people might be like, yep, I'll just move along, so, which is fine too. They just might not be right for you.
I think you guys have done an amazing thing here. I love that you did this because it's the ones that I have been able to watch. Even my friends, I got to know things about them that I didn't know before. So I love that you guys have done this.
Well, thank you.
Well, we're grateful you came on and that you were able to share all your wisdom with us.
Yes,
This was fun. I appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Yeah, we might have to have you back again since I only got half of, a podcast with you.
Hey, maybe
Anytime.
we'll have her come back on once there's a rock on that finger.
I know, have Steve
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Say all the amazing.
Sorry, Steve, if I'm putting you on the spot, but
Steve's gonna start sending you hate messages in Facebook or something like that.
dude.
Way to throw me under the bus, Corey.
We're good. We're good in our relationship and timeline. You're good. I just saw his response.
He's funny. He's a fun guy.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch and see what all the magic between you and Steve. I'll catch up.
Okay.
Everything that was discussed while I was gone, probably like, oh, he's gone. Now we can talk. All right, have the real discussion.
I gushed. I'll admit.
Alexia, we usually run these about 2 hours. We've kind of gone a little bit over,
Okay.
but gosh, I feel like obviously I kind of jumped in late, but I still feel like we could go for quite a while. Like you're one of those types of people, the guests that we have on that has some depth that we could just keep going back to that well and getting more info and just talking and talking and talking, which is fantastic. That's a credit to
Very
you.
kind.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what your and Steve's plans are. I don't know if you are going to be still available for a singles podcast anytime soon, but you know, if that time comes, would you be available and interested to come back on, maybe discuss
would love
another
to.
hot topic issue?
Yep, I would love to. This was fun.
Fantastic.
Well,
Awesome.
good.
Great.
So, Celeste, do you want to announce what we're hoping to do for Valentine's Day? And if there's anybody in
Yes.
online here that
We are looking for a couple that's not quite a couple, someone who's considering becoming a couple, that they're just about to be changing their Facebook status. So we're looking for y'all to be willing to come and let us have you on our podcast on Valentine's Day. So
We want
that
to
means two of you.
yes, both of you. You have to both be willing to come on. And it's not surprise attack on the other person. Like you have to both be okay with being here.
This is not Jesse, Raphael, no.
No.
Yeah, no, like Tom and Jenny doesn't have any idea that Tom thinks they're in a relationship, but Tom's like, hey, that's kind of awkward,
Yeah.
weird.
And Jenny's not going to come on and be like, I'm pregnant with your baby. None of those.
Yeah, no Jerry Springer episode for Valentine's.
No. We're talking legitimate, like, yeah. So,
Yeah. So if anyone has any type of situation close to that, let one of us know and we will probably get you on the show on Valentine's Day. So
Yeah, that would be
we're
fantastic.
looking for.
All right. Well, having said that, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording on this. Again, thank you. One last bit of housekeeping. For those who have not liked the Facebook page, also the YouTube page, we're working to get some of those old videos uploaded. But please give us a like, share us with your friends, help spread the word, and we're happy to have you on. Thank you for coming. Now, when we conclude this, what we usually do is stop the recording and kind of start what we call the after party show, where everybody's welcome to turn on their mic and their camera. You're certainly under no obligation to do so. If you're like, look, I'm sitting around in my jammies, I look like I just rolled out of bed, you don't want to be on camera, that's okay. But you're certainly welcome to stay and listen to everybody else and kind of get things rolling. So at this point, go ahead and turn on your cameras and your mics if you want, or just your mics or whatever you'd like to do.